Samuel, at 1st and 2nd Samuel, this is the story, the history of how the nation of Israel transitioned from being a confederation of 12 different tribes to becoming a nation under a king. And the passage I'm going to be reading to you this morning is the story about how Samuel, who was considered a judge at the time, was sent by God to pick a new king, and he selects David. So this is 1 Samuel, the 15th chapter through chapter 16, verse 13. Beginning with 15:34. Then Samuel went to Ramah, and Saul went up to his house in Gibeah of Saul. Samuel did not see Saul again until the day of his death, but Samuel grieved over Saul, and the Lord was sorry that he had made Saul king over Israel. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you grieve over Saul? I've rejected him from being king over Israel. Fill your horn with oil and set out. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided for myself a king among his sons." And Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears of it, he will kill me." And the Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, 'I have come to sacrifice to the Lord.' Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. And you shall anoint for me the one whom I name to you." Samuel did what the Lord commanded and came to Bethlehem. The elders of the city came to meet him trembling and said, "Do you come peaceably?" And he said, "Peaceably. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." And he sanctified Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they came, he looked on Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed is now before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord does not see as people see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. And he said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, and Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen any of these." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Are all your sons here?" And he said, "There remains yet the youngest, but he is keeping the sheep." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Send and bring him, for we will not sit down until he comes here." He sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. And the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him, for this is the one." Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. Samuel then set out and went to Ramah. This is the word of God for God's people. Thanks be to God. So, one of my favorite stories from childhood, and one that I appreciate in a different way as an adult, is the children's story, The Velveteen Rabbit. Does anyone remember The Velveteen Rabbit? Do we still read The Velveteen Rabbit to our kids? Well, maybe you ought to. Maybe you ought to. What I love about, if you're not familiar with the story, it goes like this. A stuffed rabbit made of velveteen is given as a Christmas present to a small boy among a lot of other really cool and exciting presents. Presents that have lights and make sound and shoot things, things that boys like. And so initially, all of the noisy, flashy toys got attention, and the Velveteen Rabbit was just kind of pushed off to the side. And the Velveteen Rabbit was feeling somewhat neglected. And the Velveteen Rabbit had a dream. He wanted one day to be real. He wanted to be a real rabbit. And he was talking to a toy horse that had been living in the closet for a while and shared with him the dream to be real. And then one day the boy got sick. And his mom took the Velveteen Rabbit and put it in the bed with the boy, and the boy began to hold on to the rabbit, and soon the rabbit began to become his favorite toy. And one evening the rabbit was talking to the horse and said, "What is real? Does it mean having things that buzz inside of you and a stick-out handle?" "Real isn't how you are made," said the horse. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. It doesn't happen all at once. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen often to those who break easily or have sharp edges or have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off and your eyes drop out and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. You know, one of the worst experiences in life for anybody is to feel like you're being ignored. To walk into a room or to walk into an office or walk into any place and feel like nobody knows or cares that I'm here. Feeling shoved off to the side, to feel like you're less than the other people in the room. On the other hand, being noticed, being recognized, it's a great joy when there's a group of people that say, we value you and we care about you. One of the things that I love about the narrative of 1 and 2 Samuel is that God continues to take people who would normally be ignored and shoved off to the side, and God notices them, and God lifts them up. It begins with Samuel himself. You may remember Samuel was left at the temple by his mother Hannah to be raised, and God calls out to this little boy who's never read the Bible and has never even heard of God. And God picks out this unlikeliest of people to be a great leader. That's how Samuel gets lifted up. And now we have David. And what the writer of the story of David's anointing wants us to notice, what he's trying to point out is, David is the runt of the litter. David is deliberately presented to us as somebody who's shoved off as somebody that doesn't matter. He's the youngest. The youngest tends to be the one. I'm middle child. I'm not picking on youngest here, but the youngest back then was tended to be the one shoved off to the side. He wasn't even there. Jesse didn't even think about bringing him down for the discussion about which of his sons was going to be anointed. And he was given the job of the shepherd. Shepherds did not have a great reputation back then. Shepherds were like the last possible job that you can find if you failed at everything else in life. So we're given this picture of David, who is nobody from nowhere and amounting to nothing. And here we go. He comes down and God says, this is the one, because God does not look at how people look on the outside. He looks at the heart. God continues to lift people up, to notice people who otherwise would get overlooked. It's hard to imagine someone with David's stature to be ignored, but that is how he began. God looks at the outer appearance. And Jesus tries to remind us of that in the gospel when Jesus says to the disciples, are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. And even the hairs of your head are all counted. So do not be afraid. You are of more value than many sparrows. I think this is relevant today because we've kind of created a culture where it's easy to ignore people. And we've created a culture where it's easy to be ignored. And we're beginning to see it play out in the news, in the media, even in churches. We're beginning to see this breakdown of relationships all around us. I noticed I was reading a finance magazine, and it said that financial planners working with people who are facing retirement are now offering a new piece of advice. They have a lot of clients who either never had kids or their kids have moved far off, and they're telling them as part of your retirement planning, you need to find some people to be in your life so that they will check on you when you're older. We used to call that friends. But we have created a situation now where financial planners are including build a social network around you because you at some point will need people. We are in that place now, and it just kind of seemed to creep up on us. People aren't building relationships. We're seeing it in the news. We've seen a rash of very successful, accomplished people take their own lives. Suicide among adults, among young adults, is climbing at an astronomical rate. It is the second leading cause of death between people 10 and 34, and it's now the 4th leading cause of death between people 35 and 54. Why is that? Because we're isolated. We're lonely. We feel like we've been ignored. We feel like we amount to nothing, and nobody notices us. How did we get here? How did we get to a place where people don't have community anymore? How did we get to a place where there's such crippling loneliness that our whole structure is beginning to fall apart around us? Now, I'm not anti-technology. Susie would disagree with me. I tell her I'm the staff Luddite, but technology does play a part in this. You know, if you want to see how technology make a comparison, if you looked at the Amish community for the last 100 years, the Amish have resisted a whole lot of new technological advances. Now, not all of them. They've resisted the television and automobiles. They haven't resisted things like advances in medicine. They're discerning about what they'll let in and what they won't let in. So there was an engineer from Arizona State University who went to go study the Amish community. His name's James Wetmore. And Dr. Wetmore went and just kind of asked them, how do you make a decision on what you're going to let in and what you're going to leave out? Like for television, for instance. And he said, it was easy to leave out television. Television is all one way. Television is all one way from a culture that's different from ours coming in, and we don't have any way to respond to it. It's all one way, so we don't want any part of it. Well, what about the automobile? He said, well, actually, if you think about it, if you have an automobile, you don't need your neighbors. If you don't have an automobile and you run out of eggs, what are you going to do? You got to go to your neighbor and borrow some eggs or get some eggs, right? But if you have a car, you can jump in your car, drive off by yourself, get your eggs, and come back. And he Dr. Wetmore laughed at that, and the man said, do you know your neighbors? And he had to admit that he didn't. He had to admit that he didn't. Casey Cunningham and I were talking this week about this very issue about loneliness and people getting isolated. We begin to look at some things that have really made life better, but could also create that sense of isolation. If you think about it, if you're living by yourself, I think you could go an entire month and never have to really engage with another human being. You can have any food you want delivered. You can order your groceries online and pull up and someone will put them in the trunk for you. If you have a minor illness, you can call something like Teladoc and get a prescription. Any entertainment you want can be fed into your house. Any prescription you want can be delivered to your house. Your dry cleaning can be delivered. All of those little things that are tasks that are time-consuming and we maybe don't always enjoy doing, but one of the benefits of doing those things is you get to be around people. But if you don't have a culture or a community around you, and you're looking more for convenience, over time, you can find yourself living as an island. And I would dare say we have a lot of people who have great material wealth, people that have great success in their careers, who are incredibly impoverished spiritually and socially. They have the resources to get everything they want, but they don't have the skills to get what they really need. They don't know how to form relationships. And I think this is one of the challenges we're facing. I think we're beginning to pay some of the price for that. It's easy to live without people right now. And it's not just damaging to individuals, it's damaging to our life together as a people. The other thing that's changed is I think the way that we use words to talk about people. We don't use words to talk about people and the things that we have in common now. We use words to talk about the way that we're different from people. We label people differently. We label people based upon their language or their politics or their socioeconomic status or their religion, not as a way of creating understanding, but as a way of saying, that's that group, this is this group, and neither shall the two meet. There's a video that went viral from New York. There was an attorney who really lost his temper. He was ordering a sandwich at a restaurant, and the clerk that was taking his order was talking to some of the customers and some of the people working with him in Spanish. because that was their native language. Now, he was talking to the attorney in English, but he was talking to the people around in Spanish, and he lost his temper. And he began to rant about, why is it that you can't speak English? Why is it that all you people are coming into this country and you're taking our benefits and you don't learn our language? And he just lost it. And one of the customers was kind of disgusted and shocked by the spectacle, so they got out their phone and they filmed it or videoed it. And it went viral. And then somebody went to this attorney's website and looked him up and began to point out the irony that on his website, his law firm advertises that it can consult with people in Hebrew, French, Chinese, and Spanish. But we see people losing it over stuff like that more and more. We see people who either because they're frustrated or they're confused or they're not getting what they want, they stop seeing the person in front of them as a person and they become something else. Technology plays a part in it too, right? If I want to order something with a machine, I push a button, I get it, and if it doesn't work, I can bang on the machine and nobody minds, right? People don't work that way. People are messy and complicated. They have bad days and they forget, and they speak different languages and they have different beliefs, and they can be maddeningly frustrating at times. A lot of pastors will joke about their congregations and say, yeah, I serve a great church if it weren't for the people that were in it. Never said by your pastor. But they're kind of making the same point. It's easy to avoid people. It's easy now to just decide, I don't want to mess with these complicated people who might disagree with me or might make me feel bad about myself or might disappoint me or might let me down. It's easier just not to deal with it until over time we don't have anybody around us. And then we don't know how to act with people when they are around us. We lose our temper. We call them things we would never call somebody. What happens is people stop being real. They're not real anymore to us because we don't feel like we've been noticed anymore and we don't notice them anymore. People are messy and they're complicated. Jesus came to us as a person because we were messy and complicated. Jesus came to us as a person because everybody else that God has sent to point the way, we threw rocks at, put in prison, and threw them into holes. He came to us as a person because we mattered to Him. He came to us as a person because we were noticed by God. And Jesus got to experience just how messed up and complicated and cruel we can be and paid a price for it. You pay a price when you deal with people, but you pay a higher price when you don't. We worship a God who notices. We worship a God who loves us, and it's God's love that makes us real. By the time you're real, most of your hair has been loved off. I appreciate that phrase so much more now. Most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. People matter to us because they matter to God. When I was reading those magazines that talked about if you're older and your financial advisor is going to tell you to build a community around you, I wanted to scream, church! It should be financial advisors telling people that. We're in the community business. But people don't always come to us. Maybe it's because we're messy and complicated and we speak in ways that people don't understand, and sometimes we don't act the way we should. But whatever the reason is, the whole world around us, not even the whole world, this zip code is filled with people who go around every day feeling like nobody notices them. Outwardly, they look fine. They drive nice cars, they live in nice townhomes, they have nice jobs, they have big bank accounts, but they are bankrupt on the inside. And they drive by church after church after church, and it never occurs to them to say that there are people there who will love me regardless of who I am or how I am. I'm absolutely convinced that there's only one body of people in this world that can solve this problem, and it's the church. People matter to us because they matter to God. If we just made it our ministry to notice people, if all we did was to let people know, when you come here, we're going to care about you, whether you like it or not. And we're going to let you into our family. And we're going to let you be as messed up and complicated and wrong as you want to be, and you're going to let us be messed up and complicated and wrong. Because we were made for each other. The church should be in the ministry of noticing and recognizing. And if that was the only thing that the church did, was to notice people as children of God and to recognize them and bring them into the family, that would be a ministry that changes the world. Let's pray together. Holy God, we are grateful for your love and for your presence in this room. We are grateful that you have pulled us into this place and given us sisters and brothers with whom we can share life. Help us to be generous with that gift. Help us to recognize that there are folks in our midst who don't know how to get what we have, don't have what we have. And help us to be inviting and open and loving in such a way that this becomes an easy place to come in and an easy place to find community. In Christ's name, amen.